Warning, this content may be upsetting or disturbing to some audiences. What's your creepiest non-paranormal story? 9th grade, my friends and I left campus for lunch, and were walking through a neighborhood. My friend noticed up ahead on the other side of the street, some guy in a pickup truck was talking to a little girl right outside his front door with the front door open. Anyway, my friend walks up to him, my friends and me following, and asks if there's a problem. The older guy said no, leave him and his granddaughter alone. My friend asks her if that's her grandfather and she said no. When he asked her if she knew him, she said no. My friend called the police. Police came. It got the neighbors' attention. Some guys across the street came out with baseball bats and chains when they saw what was going on. The police had to go and keep them from intervening, that the cops were taking care of it. The girl's mom came outside and was crying and screaming, which is what got the neighbors' attention besides the sirens. We had to write down a report for the officers. Give our contact information, though they never contacted us. If we didn't decide to walk to lunch that day, this little girl could have been kidnapped, raped and killed. I work an overnight shift as a security guard, and aside from myself, another guard and some cleaners, the building is totally empty. One night I got caught up with some other things, and by the time I got around to doing this, the lights were off, and since it was the middle of winter, there was no sign of sunlight saving me from the dark until I left at 7. I made my way to the second floor but stopped dead in my tracks when I saw the outline of a person on the other end of the floor with their arms positioned as if they were holding a large gun. I panicked and crouched behind a cubicle, but I kept looking to see where they'd go. The figure never moved from its spot, so I decided to creep closer and look around in case there was anyone else. I was pretty certain I was going to have a heart attack because all I have at my disposal is a flashlight, keychain, a walkie-talkie and some keys, and this person might possibly have a gun. They wore a baseball hat, had long shaggy hair, they were in fact holding a gun, and they were easily 6 feet tall, but they still hadn't moved. I moved a little closer and noticed that the light reflected off of the figure in an odd way. I was startled. This mysterious, gun-wielding intruder was actually a life-size cardboard cutout of Chewbacca. I legitimately spent 20 minutes stalking and building up the courage to confront a giant piece of cardboard. I live in a small cul-de-sac in the middle of nowhere. The next nearest neighborhood is over 4 miles away. One night a few years ago we got over 1.5 feet of snow overnight. So far from main roads, and on the weekend I knew our roads will be remaining plowed for quite some time. I looked and saw that they came from my neighbor's side and thought that one of their more delinquent kids played a joke as my sledding tube on the railing was popped. I decided I'd wait till later as it was early to call their parents. We immediately called her and told her I have an idea. I called the first house on the entrance and told him what was going on. He went and checked, and sure enough they were there too. Everyone started calling everyone else. I called the family at the far end and they told me there was none there. She called the woman that lives next to the end house. She said that there were footprints that led to her door, but none led away. We already called the police by this point, but now we called them back and said that it's an emergency now. They told us the roads are still all unplowed and they can't send a plow truck to clear the way as they are a privately owned company. He came and she left. We put up one guy's live feed motion recording hunting cameras facing all exits. Nothing came out. Around 7 p.m. a plow truck came as well as 3 cop cars. The couple she was staying with and her went to her house and stood in the doorway as the police searched. They found nothing. 2 of the cops went into the basement again. This time only one came up. He took her to the side room and we could hear hysterical crying. By now we are all out there. Me and a few of the other guys started towards the door when several police confronted us. A few minutes later a scruffy man screaming and kicking came out in cuffs and was led away. In his little campout they found blankets she just cleaned and put away in the room next to hers. She stayed in other people's houses for a long time before going back. Even then she wouldn't stay alone. She sold the house the next summer. He turned out to be a thrill-seeking junkie who was on probation for assault against a family member. We all were called as witnesses in the case and he took some electronics from her basement. Couldn't get him on that since he never left with the stuff. It was about 4 months of court. And that is why you always make sure you lock your doors. When I was in college, I was stopped at a gas station putting air in my tires and this man came over and started talking to me. It started off fine. It seemed he was just friendly and without much social finesse. But then he continued to get closer to me and lean on my car. There was no real way I could get into my car without trapping myself, and it just really seemed like he was intent on sticking around. My keys were also in the car, and because I was a 19-year-old Midwestern girl who still trusted the world, I know all the comments to this post will be "you should have." But I felt very trapped by the situation. About 5 or 6 minutes into this, I locked eyes with a different guy, much older, across the parking lot. I tried to convey something is wrong as hard as possible. And he quickly walked inside the gas station. A minute later, the older guy comes out of the gas station with a few sodas and walks directly out to me and said something like, "Good thing you stopped. Your mom has been hinting about being thirsty for the last half hour. I got you a soda too while I was in, so you've accomplished 2 things." He gave me an out to the situation and let the creepy guy know that someone was watching, so I followed him for about 3 miles out of town, at which point the guy just kind of waved like "you're good," and I turned and went back to my dorm. I never got a chance to thank him in person, so every time I tell this story, I have to say a big thank you to anyone who has ever done anything like this. I wish I could tell that guy that I will now always get involved when someone looks like they are in trouble, because if I'm wrong, well then I look crazy / can be embarrassed, but if I'm right I can basically save someone. A couple of months ago, my husband and I were road tripping across the US. At 3 a.m., we stopped at a rundown gas station in the middle of nowhere in Nebraska. By the middle of nowhere, I mean the middle of nowhere. The gas station was the only building in the area, and it was surrounded by empty fields. It was maybe 2 miles off the interstate. Since the gas station was closed, we were the only people there. My husband filled up the Jeep and we spent a few minutes rummaging through our bags because I couldn't find my purse. Turned out that I had left it in a relative's car in Chicago. Oops. After a while, an SUV pulled up right next to us. The driver was a white man in his late 20s or early 30s. At that point, I was sitting in the passenger seat and my husband was about to get into the driver's seat. The man approached my husband and said, "I lost my iPhone here. Have you seen it?" Suddenly, a sense of dread filled the pit of my stomach as I noticed that he already had a phone. A flip phone on his hip. I studied his face. While he looked unassuming, there was something off about him. Something sinister. "I must have left it in that field over there," he said. The field was pitch black. "Can you help me look for it?" My husband already had his iPhone out with the flashlight on. He's such a good Samaritan. He started to follow the man. I whipped out my phone and texted him, "Leave." My husband immediately saw the text and looked at me. I must have looked terrified because he ran, jumped into the car, and we booked it out of there. As we were leaving, I looked back and saw the man get into his car. We drove for about 20 miles on the interstate to a rest stop and slept there. After a short time, my husband woke me up and told me to look through the passenger side window. The man had pulled up right next to us. There were some empty parking spaces at the rest stop, and he still parked next to us. The creepy part is that we were parked at the very end of the rest stop and the spot next to us wasn't a parking space. We had our seats down to help us sleep, so he probably didn't see us in our Jeep, probably looking for us. As soon as he entered the building, we snapped our seats back up and hauled us out of there. We drove for about 50 miles and found a hotel about 6 miles north of the interstate. We never saw him again. You might call my husband naive, but in his defense, he had just lost his last living parent unexpectedly. We were on our way home from the funeral, so he wasn't all there at the moment. I was at home alone, about 18 years old at the time. I had seriously bad agoraphobia at the time. I would keep all my blinds shut, and everything locked up tight. I also had a tendency to avoid answering the door if someone knocked. It was mid-afternoon and a knock came at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone and so was instantly on guard. I decided not to answer, and ignore it, but they kept knocking. It was giving me really bad anxiety. Then they started trying to open the door, just turning the doorknob as it was locked. This went on for about 20 minutes, them still knocking and trying to get in, so I finally answered the door. I kept the screen door locked though. There was a very disheveled, homeless-looking man there, big scraggly beard, long knotty, wild hair, dirty clothes. He asked if he could come in and stare at me. Then he started yelling out, pretty girl, come back, let me in, just let me look at you." Continued knocking and trying to get in. I had no phone on me at the time. I couldn't call the police. I was terrified. Eventually my boyfriend came home and found him standing on our porch. He asked my boyfriend if he could come inside and look at the pretty girl. My boyfriend told him to go away or he would call the police, but he still wouldn't leave. Boyfriend called the police and they came and took him away and talked to him. Police came back and told us he was actually our neighbor whose brother had passed away recently and he had gone completely off the rails and had been binge drinking every day and not leaving his flat. When I was 18 or 19 I went out to a New Year's Eve party in the city and dropped my ID in the street. It was mailed back to me by a gentleman named Leopold. Leopold was 53 and had recently been released from prison. He sent pictures of him volunteering at a soup kitchen. Leopold was determined that him finding my ID was a sign and that we were destined to be together. He sent Bible verses that, to him, justified this belief. He mostly expressed regret that I lived too far away, and that he didn't have a car to come visit me. I was not at all regretful about this. Leopold sent other letters, but I never opened them. My brother was selling some of his old laptop stuff on Craigslist. He got an email from a middle-aged woman inquiring about the laptop. My brother got slightly suspicious, but not enough to back out of the deal. When it was time to meet up, my brother didn't park behind the farm fresh, but in the neighborhood with a good 50 yards between him and the fence. While still in the car, he texted her that he was at the discussed location. She texted that she couldn't see him, so he said that he was right around the side of the store and to get out and meet him. No woman with him at all. A minute later, the same woman texted back saying that she still couldn't find him. Needless to say, the deal was off. I lived in a rural area, mountains and woods around the premises. Anyways, I used to smoke outside on this slab concrete type thing on the side of the house. Not even halfway into my cig, I heard a deep growling noise, and it slowly got closer and louder as it did. How close I don't know. Didn't want to make a slow sudden movements either, so I flicked my cig into the distance and jumped into the house, slammed and locked the door. Made a plan that I'd tip over this large wooden cabinet in front of the door if something tried getting in. Assumed it was a bear. Another time, same residence. Heard numerous, 4 maybe 5, slams on the back door, slowly crept to the door and tried looking outside without being obvious though the lights were off back there. But then I heard some thuds on the roof above me. I called the police. They came out within 10 or so minutes, so yeah, but it doesn't explain the roof thuds. 9 years old, I was playing cops and robbers in the woods at night and a police search helicopter was patrolling over us with a spotlight. Turns out they were looking for an escaped inmate from the state pen. I've posted this before but it's still creepy AF. I babysit my cousin 2 kids pretty much every other Friday night so he and his wife can have some time alone and out of the house. Their kids are 2 and 6 months so they have video monitors in each of their rooms and I pretty much watch the monitors and read or watch TV. It was a man's voice and he kept saying over and over again, "It's okay, go back to sleep, I'm here," and I could see a figure standing over the crib in the 6-month-old's room. I freaked out thinking someone has broken it. They had a break-in around Christmas time and the guy was never caught. No one was upstairs and both kids were sound asleep. Needless to say, I was thoroughly freaked out until the police and my cousin came out. But since it was daytime, the video monitor gave off a better picture of the room. Apparently the one monitor in the 6-month-old's room switches over to the neighbor's monitor every once in a while. When I was 10 I watched a haunting till midnight, went to sleep and heard strange scratching noises behind my computer desk. I got so scared that I held my piss for as long as I could. When morning came and I investigated, it was nothing more than a medium-sized crab stuck behind the desk hole. When I was about 10 years/0, I took a public transpo from my school to my house. It is about a half-hour drive and I was sitting beside the driver. Few minutes before my destination, I noticed I am the only passenger left. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.